March 1971, Washington, D.C. Congress votes to withdraw federal funding for the Boeing 2707 SST program. Boeing had already spent hundreds of millions. 2 full-scale mock-ups sat in a Seattle hangar. The aircraft was designed to carry 277 passengers at Mach 2.7 across the Pacific. Faster than Concorde, longer range than Concorde, American engineered. It never flew, not once. 2 years later, in 1973, the FAA banned civil supersonic flight over the continental United States. The reasoning was noise. The consequence was economic. Any supersonic airliner was now confined to overwater routes. The domestic supersonic market was killed by regulation before it could be killed by physics. For 50 years, commercial aviation accepted a painful truth. Supersonic passenger travel was a beautiful, impractical relic. Concorde limped along until 2003, propped up by 2 governments and a shrinking pool of passengers who could stomach a $12,000 round trip. When it retired, so did the dream. Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed, every major aerospace manufacturer buried their supersonic programs. The consensus was almost unanimous. The physics don't work economically, ever. Then, in January 2025, a startup called Boom Supersonic broke the sound barrier over the Mojave Desert with a 1/3 scale demonstrator. 5 months later, a presidential executive order cracked open the 50-year overland ban. But here's what makes no sense. Every major engine manufacturer said no. Rolls-Royce walked. Pratt Whitney declined. GE passed. Boom has raised roughly $1 billion in total, a fraction of what a clean sheet aircraft program typically costs. Yet United committed to 15 aircraft. American put deposits on 20. Japan Airlines pre-ordered 20 more. So how can a startup resurrect an aviation category that killed Concorde, buried Boeing's SST ambitions, and defeated entire nations? Why supersonic commercial aviation failed the first time comes down to a single number. Concorde burned more than 5,600 imperial gallons of fuel per hour. A modern Boeing 787 Dreamliner burns roughly 1,300 imperial gallons per hour while carrying 3 times as many passengers. The mathematics were brutal. Supersonic aircraft require fundamentally different aerodynamics. The engines must produce enormous thrust to push through the sound barrier. That thrust requires fuel. That fuel adds weight. That weight reduces range and passenger capacity. The trade-off seemed permanent. Airlines adapted by accepting slower speeds in exchange for efficiency. The Boeing 747 became the queen of the skies not because it was fast, but because it could carry 400 passengers economically across oceans. The Airbus A380 doubled down on the same philosophy. Wide bodies, high capacity, subsonic cruise. The template was locked. Boeing had every reason to stay conservative. The 2707 program had left institutional scars. When Concorde retired in 2003, Boeing had already pivoted to the 787, a subsonic, composite-heavy aircraft optimized for fuel efficiency, not speed. Airbus followed the same path with the A350. Both manufacturers spent the next 2 decades refining exactly the same architecture. Engines got better, wings got more efficient, materials got lighter. Each program delivered incremental gains, typically low to mid-teen improvements over what came before. The consensus was total. Lockheed abandoned its supersonic concepts. Boeing shelved every SST study. Airbus showed zero interest. The message was clear: the physics don't work. But what if the physics hadn't changed and the technology had? Because computational fluid dynamics had advanced exponentially since the 1970s. Carbon fiber composites had revolutionized aircraft weight. Engine efficiency had improved dramatically. Same physics, entirely different tools. Into that gap walks Boom Supersonic, with an aircraft the entire aerospace establishment had refused to build. Blake Scholl grew up watching Cessnas take off from small airports near suburban Cincinnati. He started flying in college. He holds a private pilot's license with an instrument rating. Aviation wasn't a career path, it was a lifelong obsession. His career went somewhere else entirely. After studying computer science, Scholl joined Amazon as a software engineer, developing automated merchandising systems. By 24, he was responsible for initiatives generating $300 million in revenue. He pioneered automated digital ad buying. He became the first employee at mobile startup Kima Labs, which Groupon acquired in 2012. Then he saw a Concorde in a museum, and the question hit him. Why had supersonic travel disappeared? What would it actually take to bring it back? Scholl didn't dismiss the challenge because he lacked aerospace credentials. He approached it the way he had approached every problem, from first principles. He studied the aerodynamics, he mapped the economics, and he found something the aerospace establishment had overlooked. Concorde's economics failed partly because 1960s technology couldn't solve the efficiency problem. But nearly every one of those enabling technologies had transformed by the 2010s. Scholl raised funding from Y Combinator, the startup accelerator behind Airbnb and Dropbox. Sam Altman, then Y Combinator's president, invested personally. The pitch was audacious: build a supersonic airliner that could operate profitably at business class fares rather than first class premiums, make speed accessible to millions rather than thousands. Then the airlines started signing up. Japan Airlines invested $10 million and pre-ordered 20 aircraft. United Airlines signed agreements for 15 Overtures with options for 35 more. American Airlines put deposits on 20 aircraft with options on 40 more. That's 55 firm commitments and 95 options from 3 of the most sophisticated airline operators on the planet. Read that back: American, United, and JAL, carriers with a combined market capitalization in the tens of billions, have collectively committed to buy up to 150 aircraft from a company that has never delivered a commercial jet. This is where the story should have accelerated smoothly into production. It didn't, because orders in aerospace are contingent on the aircraft actually existing, and Boom faced a problem that threatened to end the entire venture before a single commercial aircraft could be built. No aircraft flies without a certified engine, and no startup builds one alone. Boom approached Rolls-Royce, Pratt Whitney, and GE Aviation, every commercial engine manufacturer capable of powering Overture. The answer was consistently no. Rolls-Royce, whose Olympus engines had powered the original Concorde, publicly withdrew in 2022. Pratt Whitney declined. GE Aviation passed. The rejections weren't personal, they were economic. Developing a new supersonic engine requires billions in investment and certification processes that take years. No engine manufacturer could justify that outlay for a startup's unproven aircraft with uncertain market demand. This should have ended Boom's ambitions entirely. So, what do you do when every engine manufacturer says no? You build it yourself. In December 2022, Boom announced the Symphony engine program. The company partnered with Florida Turbine Technologies, a subsidiary of Kratos Defense, to design the power plant. Standard Aero would handle maintenance. Florida Turbine's engineers had built supersonic fighter engines. These were legitimate credentials. But military jet engines and commercial transport engines serve entirely different purposes. A fighter engine might accumulate 2,000 flight hours over its lifetime. A commercial engine must reliably operate for 20,000 to 30,000 hours across decades of service, including rebuilds. The durability requirements are fundamentally different. The certification standards are far more stringent, and Kratos had never certified a commercial transport engine in its history. Boom was now attempting to do what typically requires 2 aerospace giants working in parallel: build a revolutionary airframe and develop a completely new engine simultaneously. Symphony is designed as a medium bypass turbofan optimized for supersonic cruise without afterburners. Target speed Mach 1.7. Target capability, what Boom calls boomless cruise, a configuration intended to minimize sonic boom intensity over populated areas. Full-scale engine testing is planned to begin at Colorado Air and Spaceport in 2026. The audacity impressed some observers, the risk terrified others, but building the engine was only half the problem. Because even with a working power plant, Boom still didn't have the money to bring the aircraft to market. A clean-sheet commercial aircraft typically costs tens of billions of dollars to develop. Boom had raised about $700 million. Previous supersonic programs died right here, not because the engineering failed, but because the funding ran out. Concorde required continuous government subsidies. Boeing abandoned the 2707 when Congress withdrew backing. Every previous supersonic program depended on state-level resources. And then, in December 2025, Boom made one of the most unconventional moves in modern aerospace. They took the Symphony engine core, the same core designed to power Overture, and adapted it into a 42-megawatt natural gas turbine called Superpower, not for aircraft, for AI data centers. Crusoe Energy ordered 29 units, representing 1.2 gigawatts of capacity. The deal represents a backlog of more than $1.25 billion. In the same funding round, Boom raised $300 million led by Dasana Capital Partners at a valuation of roughly $1.5 billion. Read that back. Boom is now potentially funding a supersonic airliner using profits from selling jet engine derivatives to power artificial intelligence. CEO Blake Scholl stated explicitly that turbine business profits are intended to finance Overture certification. The strategy mirrors how Tesla used regulatory credit sales to fund manufacturing during its early years. It addresses the fundamental problem that killed every previous supersonic program: how to survive the valley of death between prototype and production. Then, in June 2025, the regulatory landscape shifted. A presidential executive order directed the FAA to repeal the 1973 overland supersonic flight ban. The order didn't automatically legalize supersonic flight over populated areas, but it opened the pathway for aircraft that could demonstrate acceptable noise levels. Boom's Boomless Cruise addresses this directly. Mach 1.3 over land using Mach cutoff physics to prevent audible booms from reaching the ground, then accelerating to full supersonic speed over water. According to Boom, this represents a threefold expansion in addressable market. A door locked for 50 years had just cracked open. Now zoom out from the aircraft to the industry, because if Boom actually delivers, they don't just have a fast airplane, they have a monopoly. No competing manufacturer has a comparable program anywhere near as advanced. Boeing abandoned supersonic concepts decades ago and has no active SST program. And critically, Boeing right now cannot start one. The 737 MAX fallout, the 787 quality issues, the 777X delays, the balance sheet pressure, and intensified FAA certification scrutiny have left Boeing unable to launch a clean sheet commercial program of any kind for years. Every executive briefing at Boeing today is about stabilizing existing products, not launching new architectures. Airbus is in a stronger position, but it shows no supersonic ambition. The A350 and A321XLR are both subsonic long-range aircraft aimed at the middle of the market. Airbus has less urgency to gamble on a radical architecture, which is precisely why it won't. China's COMAC has publicly floated a Mach 1.6 concept called the C949, but no confirmed funding, no prototype, no timeline. In terms of certified commercial supersonic capability, Boom is competing against nobody. That's why the airlines are lining up. United, American, and Japan Airlines didn't place those orders because they're certain Boom will deliver. They placed them because if Boom does deliver, being late means watching your competitors own the most premium product in commercial aviation. Consider what that product actually is. A New York to London round trip on a conventional 787 costs a business executive roughly 14 hours in the air, plus recovery time from jet lag. It burns a full day of productive time. The same trip on Overture, 3.5 hours each direction. A same-day round trip becomes possible. Boom targets a ticket price around $5,000 for that round trip, comparable to today's business class fares on premium carriers, roughly 1/4 of Concorde's inflation-adjusted pricing. At that price point, Boom isn't chasing the mass market. It's targeting the highest value travelers on the planet, corporate executives, investment bankers, deal makers whose hourly value exceeds the premium for speed, limited seats, limited routes, extreme exclusivity. Now consider the strategic implication for the duopoly. Boeing and Airbus cannot pivot into supersonic in 3 years. Their entire production systems, supplier ecosystems, and certification expertise are built around tube and wing subsonic aircraft. A new architecture would require new tooling, new factories, new supplier relationships, realistically, a decade minimum. Meanwhile, United, American, and Japan Airlines are already engaged with Boom. The competitive clock has started, and it's ticking against the incumbents, not for them. Boom doesn't need to replace Boeing and Airbus. It just needs to prove that a supersonic airliner can be commercially profitable. If it does, the assumption that the duopoly owns the premium end of the market forever is dead. But this story is not remotely settled. In January 2025, Boom's 1/3 scale XB-1 demonstrator broke the sound barrier for the first time, reaching Mach 1.122 over the Mojave Desert. That flight proved Boom's engineers can design and build something that flies supersonically. It did not prove they can build something large, fast, safe, and economical at commercial scale. Scale introduces entirely new problems. XB-1 is a demonstrator. Overture is a 64 to 80 seat commercial airliner. Aerodynamic behavior changes. Structural loads scale non-linearly. Systems integration multiplies in complexity. The XB-1 flight was necessary, it was not sufficient. Then there's the timeline. Boom originally targeted Overture service by 2023. That slipped to 2025, then 2027. Current projections suggest 2029 at the earliest, and many aerospace analysts expect the 2030s. Symphony engine testing must complete by late 2026. First flight must happen by 2027. Certification must finish by 2029. Any significant slip could exhaust funding before commercial service begins. Environmental questions haven't gone away either. Supersonic aircraft burn between 3 and 7 times as much fuel per passenger kilometer as subsonic alternatives. Boom's answer is 100% sustainable aviation fuel, a commitment that addresses carbon intensity but not absolute consumption. Environmental groups remain skeptical. Airlines with net zero targets are watching cautiously. And Kratos has still never certified a commercial transport engine. That gap is the single largest technical risk in the program. Boom has survived every previous existential threat. The engine partnership, the funding gap, the regulatory ban. But the remaining risks are real, and any one of them could still end everything. In 1976, a Concorde flew because 2 governments subsidized a technological marvel that could not sustain itself economically. It was a monument to what state resources could achieve when profit was not the point. 50 years later, Boom is making an entirely different bet. That the problem worth solving isn't just engineering, it's building a business model that can survive long enough for the engineering to succeed, fund the aircraft through commercial revenue streams, sell the engine core to a completely different industry, design the product around modern airline economics, not government prestige. Let AI data center profits pay for supersonic aviation. That is not how any previous SST program was structured, which is precisely why every previous SST program failed. Boeing is not launching a supersonic program, Airbus is not launching a supersonic program, neither will for at least another decade, and probably longer. If Boom delivers, they will own the entire certified commercial supersonic market by default. United, American, and Japan Airlines will be first movers in a segment with no serious competition, and the highest margin travelers in aviation, the corporate executives and deal makers who currently sit in Emirates First Class or British Airways Club Suite, will have somewhere completely new to go. Concorde isn't coming back. What might be coming is something Concorde could never afford to be: profitable. The settled hierarchy, the idea that subsonic tube and wing had permanently won commercial aviation, is now definitively under threat. The question isn't whether a startup can resurrect supersonic travel, it's whether the rest of the industry is really paying attention to what happens if they do.